Hi everyone, this is Nia, and today I have an extra video where I'll talk a little bit about colors and other questions. It has come to my attention that I've been getting a few questions when it comes to my favorite colors or how I choose my colors for paintings in general. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about that. So I guess this can be sort of like a mini Q&A session as well. I'm not going to focus so much on edits and aesthetics for this one. I just hope that this information will answer some of your questions. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I started out with hobby and student grade paints like koi and pentel. Then I traveled to Japan and bought my first artist grade paint, which is a set of Holbein, and that is why you'll notice that I have a lot of Holbein paints and they're my main colors. And along the way, my friend Tracy sent me a huge care package filled with different brands of paint for me to try out, which is why I have other brands as well, like Schminke, Daniel Smith, Roman Schmal, Winsor & Newton, and so on. I like to keep them all in half pans mostly, and some are in full pans that I got from my friend, and I gather them in pencil cases for easy access. When I like to paint, I just pick the colors from what I see here and I place the half pans themselves on my palette, as you have seen from my tutorials. This way I can fully clean my palette each time and customize the colors that I use without having to stick to ones that dried up on the palette itself. I just find that this system makes the painting process more flexible for me, as I have access to a larger array of colors without having to switch palettes. I'm not going to go through all the colors here because I have a lot, and honestly I haven't actually even used every single one of them yet, because it takes a while for me to get used to the colors and fully grasp the colors to incorporate them into paintings. A lot of these are also doubles that Tracy gave me of primaries, which I like to use. But I just want to talk a little bit about colors you should start out with, since this is also a question I get a lot of. For me personally, I find it hard to use a lot of new colors or new palettes straight away because I don't know the colors well enough to imagine what they would look like mixed with other colors in the new palette. If you've watched my tutorials for a while, you will know that I have go-to mixtures that I like to work with, and this is because I already have a library of colors that I often use in my head. And when I get new colors, I tend to try to incorporate them one by one until I get used to those colors mixed with the rest of the colors that I already have on my palette. So having a lot of colors can be a bit confusing if you're new to watercolors. When you're painting, you're basically making a lot of small decisions along the way, like values, temperatures, hues, saturation, color relation, and so on. This can be very confusing when you have a lot of colors to choose from. This is why when someone asks me what to start with, I always recommend with primaries and maybe browns, but you can also mix browns with those primaries. Using the primaries will serve as basic color theory and basic color mixing practice, and the more you do this, the more you'll get used to how the colors will react to each other without having to even swatch it out. And this is what I mean by library of colors in my head as I'm picking out colors for my painting. Even just from those primaries, you can actually get a lot of different colors already, so imagine you already having a lot of access to those colors just from the primaries by mixing them, and then you have so much more colors that you haven't used. Either you won't get the full use of those colors, or you'll just end up getting used to using the colors straight out of your palette without color mixing, and that way you might not get enough practice with color mixing. Even if I have a huge collection of colors, you'll notice that I always limit the colors I use for painting and end up doing a lot of color mixing along the way. This will actually help the painting link together and the tonality of the painting stays consistent with each other, rather than using a lot of different hues straight from the pans, which might have different tonalities or temperatures. Once you're comfortable with the primary colors, you can start to play around with different temperatures or tones of the primary colors with added browns, yellow ochre, greens, and things like that. Then slowly build your library of colors. Usually I like to get a set of 24 colors, and that will go a very long way. So with the primaries that I've chosen here, if you mix them all together, you can actually create brown tones. The brown will depend on the ratio of the mix, and I can create lots of different tones of browns as well. So you can really go a very long way by just painting with these primaries. However, the reason why I prefer to have brown on my palette and green is because I use those colors a lot, and it can be a bit tricky to create the exact same ratio all the time when you need specific tones. You can also try different versions of primaries. So here as an example, I have the usual printer's primary colors, which is something a bit more similar to cyan, magenta, and yellow. As I'm mixing the colors, you can see the difference in vibrancy and purity of the colors. It's a bit light though if I want to create browns for this, but you can see that the browns are within the same tonality of the primaries that I've used. This is what keeps a painting consistent all throughout, but if you are using these colors as primaries, I would suggest for you to add black to create the darker values, just like a printer would have CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is for black. Once you get used to the chosen primaries, you can even mix and match the different tones of reds and blues and yellows and try to build your library from here. So on to the next part of the video, I'll try to explain my thinking process of how I pick my colors for this particular painting here, which will actually be scheduled for spring next year. And yes, I schedule really far ahead because there are things coming in the next few months. And that should also answer another question on how I stay consistent with my uploads, is that I schedule really far ahead. So when I have family stuff to do in the coming months, I don't have to worry about uploading. I haven't edited this one yet though, but you'll see it sometime in spring 2023. This will be a painting of a florist or a flower shop, and the first thing that I think about is the main building itself. I want the building to have a light neutral color, but I wasn't sure what shade I want the building to have, so I picked these three colors, which is buff titanium, and it has more of a warm tone, gray of gray, which has more of a cooler tone, and John Brilliant Dark, which is a bit yellow. I know what these colors look like, but sometimes I like to compare them in order to see them side by side next to the outline. By swatching them, I realized that the John Brilliant was a bit too yellow, and I wasn't sure between the gray of gray and buff titanium at this point, so I just set both of them aside. Moving on, I know I'll definitely need browns for the stem of the tree as well as some of the pots. I decided with sepia and quinsiana for the browns. Sepia is very dark and muted, so I can use it to mix with the greens and other colors to mute or darken them. And the quinsiana is very vibrant, it's almost orangey brown, so I decided to use it for the pots, and I can also get a mid brown similar to burnt umber or burnt sienna, mixing the quinsiana and sepia together, so this pair will be enough. Next are the greens. Technically, I just need one green usually for paintings because I can change the tone easily by adding yellows, blues, browns, reds, or purples to get different greens. But I felt like using two here for some reason, so I decided to go for Terra Verde, which is a bit more pastel and muted, which is why I love this color, as well as Aquarius Green. I love the richness of Aquarius Green and the fact that it's muted, so I don't have to mix it with brown to tone it down and make it look natural. Here I have Graphite Gray and Lamp Black. Graphite Gray I already know I'm going to use since it's good to darken colors and mute down colors, but I'm not sure with the Lamp Black yet, but I'm just going to keep it with me and decide later as I paint. So that's it for the main colors that I'm going to use a lot of. The rest are the hues that can be mixed into the neutrals and hues that I'm going to be using to create different colorful flowers. The best way is, of course, to have primaries with you that you can mix together to create those different hues, and also a white to turn the color softer and more pastel-y. I like to include a bit of secondaries as well. You can add purples or oranges if you would like. I also have this John Brilliant because it's one of my go-to mixtures to create a pink, from Jaune Brilliant with Quin Red. So these are just a rough pick, and I like to have these right next to me as I paint, but I might still change my mind along the way and limit the color choice further when I paint and feel like I don't need certain colors. So let me just quickly go over the hues that I have here. So all these hues I can mix with the greens or the browns to change the tone slightly, which is why I don't need a lot of those colors. Technically, I don't actually need this purple because I can use the blues and mix it with the reds to create purples, but I wasn't sure at this point, which is why I just have them here. Here you'll see me have two reds. I have Vermilion and Quin Red. Vermilion is a warmer red and Quin Red is a rose, and I like the difference in the temperature of those reds that I can mix into other colors as well as use them as is. And for the blues here, I have two types. One is Compost Blue and one is French Ultramarine. Compost Blue is also a bit warmer, whereas French Ultramarine is a bit cooler. And this is why I find that having different temperatures of primary colors is very useful, because you can create different tonalities on your secondary colors as well. You'll see me have white here. I'm definitely going to use the white because I can use any of these colors plus the color mixtures of the secondaries or tertiary colors mixed with the white to make it more pastel for a different tone. As for the yellow, I just have Hansa Yellow Medium here. You can also use New Gamboge, but I find that I can easily mix a color like New Gamboge by just adding Vermilion into the Hansa Yellow Medium. There's also Lemon Yellow, but I'm not a big fan of Lemon Yellow because it's a little bit too cold for the paintings that I usually do. I usually just use them in special occasions if I'm painting landscapes and if I need to make the sun look super bright. Apart from that, I personally just like to stick with Hansa Yellow Medium because it's a good primary and it's very versatile. I also always like to have bleed-proof white right next to me as a safety net. I kind of treat it as sort of an eraser from time to time, but I always try to avoid using it when I can. Which comes to the question, can I substitute bleed-proof white with white watercolors? And the answer is no, because bleed-proof white is very opaque and you can substitute it with titanium white gouache, whereas white watercolor serves to mix into other colors to make them pastel and have an easier consistency to work with lighter colors. You can technically just create pastel colors or very light colors by adding a lot of water, but that would make the consistency very watery, and personally, I just find it quite hard to work with. So if I want to use a light color, I just use the white to thicken the paint slightly so it's a little bit easier to glide on without it puddling up. And that's just how I personally use my white watercolors. Let me just quickly show you an example. Here are bright colors that I've tried off, and I layered bleed-proof white right on top of it. You can see that the white is very opaque and distinct compared to the white watercolor at the bottom. Initially it was opaque as I placed it on, but once I dry it off, it becomes much more transparent. Now I'm going to mix the white into the colors. As you can see, it just lightens the color, and even though the color is very light, it's still very much workable on the palette since the white thickens the paint so it's not too watery. When paint is too watery, it beads up a lot and it becomes more difficult to control the load on your brush, and there's a higher risk of things puddling up when you're trying to paint a tiny area. Now there are lighter colors for this too, so you don't have to mix it with white like Cobalt Violet Light by Holbein or colors that I've tried with the Senelia brand. They are very light, so those are easier to control as well without mixing the white in. Another question that I get asked quite a bit is, what are my favorite colors? I don't really have favorites, it just depends on what I need them for. So I thought I'll just take you through my current go-to colors that I'm going to pack to bring with me to Austria, since I'll be going back there in a couple of weeks' time. By the time you see this video though, I'm probably already there, but anyway, I'm going to start with light colors. This is Buff Titanium and you've probably seen me using this a lot. I just love really light colors like this because it serves as a neutral for areas which might be white, and it's really hard to get the right ratio to mix colors like this, so it's definitely something that I'm going to bring. Next, I have Titanium Gold Ochre. This is by Schminke and I like using this as the light or base color for cakes. I just find that It has a nice vibrancy to it. I used to use yellow ochre, but this has more of golden brown tone, which I love for baked goods. Same goes for Jaune Brilliant Dark. I find that is a color that's quite hard to mix, and I'm just going to bring that. Next to it is Gray of Grey, which is another go-to neutral, but it has more of a cooler tone. The color that I'm holding here is Chinese White, and you guys know that I like to mix this with other hues to create pastel tones. Of course, I'm going to have my safety net with me, which is Bleed Proof White as well. I mentioned before that this is sort of my safety net for erasing, or sort of like a whiteout for my mistakes. Next, I'm going to bring some primaries with me. Let's start out with red. This is Winsor Red, which is the typical primary red color, so that's really useful to mix with other colors. You can also use Naphthol Red. They're quite similar, but Naphthol Red by mgram tend to be a little bit too liquid for me to travel with, so I chose the Winsor Red. Here I also have Vermilion, which is more of a warmer red. You can technically use a little bit of yellow mixed into the Winsor Red to create the same tone, so it's something that you can substitute easily. Vermilion is just one of those colors that I like to mix with other tones to warm it up, which is why it might be a bit difficult to always find the exact ratio all the time, so I just prefer to have the color with me. Next here is Crimson Lake. It's a nice vibrant dark red, somewhat like a maroon. It's very similar to Rose Madder. Honestly, I would only need one of those colors as I find them really similar to each other. Here I have Quin Red. You guys know I use this a lot. I'm actually one of those people who feels like cyan, magenta, yellow is more of the ideal primary colors. Quin Red for me is somewhat like a magenta, so you can actually add yellow to Quin Red to create the more well-known primary red like the Winsor Red. Quin Red is very vibrant, and it can also make really vibrant purples when it's mixed with blues. So next are the yellows. The same principle goes. I want different tones and temperatures of the yellows. This is Hansa Yellow Light, which is really bright like lemon yellow. I don't use it often, just when I'm painting bright light for sunset scenes, but just in case, I like to have it with me. Next is Hansa Yellow Medium, which is my go-to yellow. It has enough warmth in the color, but it's not too orange. I also have New Gamboge here, which is a warmer yellow that is almost going to orange. Next are the blues. I don't really use blues too often in my paintings, but just in case I need them, I like to have them with me. This is Ultramarine Finest by Schmincke, very similar to Ultramarine Blue, very vibrant, deep blue, but I also like the smooth consistency of Schmincke paints. I'm also going to take Cobalt Blue with me, as well as Compost Blue. Same principle goes, they're different in terms of tones, so I just like to have different tones of primaries. I'm also going to take Indigo as well as Payne's Grey Bluish by Schmincke. I know that I don't have Payne's Grey Bluish here right now though, but I did put it in at the end. I also have Azure Blue. It's a very vibrant turquoise blue, very nice for water scenes. I don't paint water often, but just in case, I like to have it with me. So those are the primaries. Next, I'm going to go to greens. They're very useful since I like painting plants. This is Cobalt Green Hue. It's more of a novelty color, but I've been using it quite often since it looks nice paired with other colors as well, and I use them mostly for doodles or if certain objects are actually that color, so it's something that I use straight out of my palette instead of something that I mix with other colors. Next are the staple greens. I put sap green down already. That's just a very useful color. Almost use it every time when I'm painting plants. Next to it is Viridian, which is a brighter green. I don't use it too often, but since it's dark but vibrant at the same time, it can become very useful. Next to that is Aquarius Green, which is a dark green, but I love how muted the color is, so I don't really need to mix it with other tones too much, so it's very handy. I also have Terra Verde with me, which is a green that I like to use for fall foliage since it's a bit more muted and it's a bit more pastel-y, but it has a warmth to it. Next is Hooker's Green by Quatman. This is another dark green like the Viridian, but it's not as vibrant. It is a little bit more natural, so I like natural, more muted tones, and it's very handy when painting plants. The next secondary color that I'm going to pick is purple. This is Rose of Ultramarine by Daniel Smith. It's a very vibrant purple, and it's something that I can actually mix and substitute by using Quin Red and some of the blues I have here, but for the sake of not having to mix so many colors together, I prefer to have it with me for convenience. At the very end, because I have space, I also included Mineral Violet, which is the purple that I usually mix with my browns to create a deeper brown. After that, I'm going to go to the grays. This is Moon Glow, which is a grayish purple that I like to use to create harsh shadows. It's very muted, but it has a slight purple tone, which I love about it, so it has a little bit of warmth. Next is Graphite Gray. This is a color that I like to mix with others to mute it or tone down certain colors and darken it. And next is Lamp Black, which is a very opaque black. It's very useful to create tiny little details or writing if I need to. Moving on to the browns, I have Sepia. I use this the same way as I use Graphite Gray to mix it with other colors, and it's also very useful because it's a very dark brown. Next is a color that I also use a lot of, which is Quin Sienna. It's a little bit like burnt sienna, but it's much brighter and more vibrant. And if I want to turn this into more of a burnt sienna, I would just add sepia to it. I'm also going to take burnt umber as well as yellow ochre. They're one of the staples that you get if you buy the 24 color set of watercolors. I have two yellow ochres here. On the left is by Roman Schmal and on the right is by Holbein. I only have this one half pan for the Roman Schmal one, and it's actually one of my favorites because the yellow ochre is very vibrant in comparison to the yellow ochre on the Holbein. But I'm running out, so I'm just going to take the Holbein one with me. I'm also going to take Jean Brilliant. It's one of those colors that I like to mix with reds to create nice pink colors. So now I just want to lay out all the colors here to see how much space I have left. And at the very end, I ended up adding the Roman Schmal yellow ochre just in case I need the vibrancy of that yellow ochre. Permanent Green number 1 by Holbein, which is a light green color, as well as Mineral Violet. So that's the colors that I'm going to bring along with me. I'm going to refill some of the paints which are kind of running out. And that's it for this video. I know I didn't really mention favorites, but hopefully this video somewhat fills you in about how I pick my colors or what I look for in colors. Hope you guys enjoyed this extra video, and I'll see you guys at the next tutorial. Bye!